A single mother dances for an Arab billionaire to save her son, but discovers a shocking secret. Before we begin the story, let us know in the comments which city are you watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone. Leah, a single mother and a refugee in Qatar, had endured countless hardships each day, was a struggle to put food on the table and protect her 3-year-old son from the harsh weight of poverty. She worked as a waitress in a modest cafe frequented by tourists, but her wages barely covered the basics when the cafe owner announced he would have to cut back her working hours. Her heart sank. She needed to find a solution quickly, or her son Yusuf would go hungry one afternoon. As Lila was serving tables, she noticed a man sitting alone in a corner. He exuded power and mystery. His spotless white robe and piercing gaze caught her attention. She heard his name whispered by the customers. Khed Al-Fahim, one of the wealthiest and most enigmatic in Qatar. Khaled's eyes never left her. As the cafe closed, an employee approached Lila and handed her an envelope. "Mr. Al-Fahim asked me to give this to you," he said before hurrying away with trembling hands. Lila opened the envelope. Inside was a short, direct note. "Leah Roshan, I have a proposal that could solve your problems. Meet me tomorrow at 8 p.m. at the address below. Come alone, Khed Al-Fahim." Her heart raced. A proposal from someone as powerful as Khed could either be the solution she desperately needed or the beginning of something dangerous. But with Yusuf as her top priority, Leah decided to take the risk the next evening. After putting Yusuf to sleep, Leila arrived at the address specified in the note. It was a grand palace on the outskirts of the city. A butler escorted her to a luxurious room where Khuld was waiting. He greeted her with a slight nod and gestured to a chair in front of him. "Leah, thank you for coming," he began, his voice deep and calm. "I've heard about your situation and believe I can help you." Layla sat down, feeling the weight of the moment. "What do you want from me?" she asked bluntly. Khed leaned forward slightly. "I need a dancer." "A dancer?" Lila frowned, puzzled. "Yes, for private performances. My guests appreciate art and tradition. In return, I offer a generous amount, enough to ensure you and your son never struggle again." She remained silent, her heart pounding. The offer seemed straightforward, but she knew a man like Khed didn't make such proposals without ulterior motives. "Why me?" she asked. Ked's gaze remained steady. "You have something unique, a spark that few possess, and you're beautiful." Leah felt a shiver run down her spine. "What are the conditions?" "Simple. You will dance only for me and my guests. There will be no physical contact. Everything will remain professional." As outlined in the contract, he slid a document across Ross the table. Leah quickly skimmed through the clauses, each one more surreal than the last. She hesitated. The idea of dancing for Khed and his guests made her uneasy, but the image of Yusuf going hungry flashed in her mind without overthinking. She grabbed the pen and signed "Welcome to my world." Leela Khed gave a faint smile, a blend of mystery and danger. Lila didn't know it yet, but that contract wouldn't just ensure you of survival. It would change their lives forever. The next evening, Layla found herself back at the palace, caught in a mix of nerves and determination. The weight of the contract felt heavier now that she was about to perform for the first time. Still, the thought of Yusuf safe and sleeping with a full stomach kept her steady. She was led to a lavish room where traditional dance attire was laid out. An emerald dress with golden embroidery and translucent veils shimmered under the soft glow of the chandeliers. Layla dressed in silence, fastening the anklet bells, their gentle sound filling the room like a prelude. When she was finally summoned, she followed the butler to a grand hall adorned with luxurious tapestries and Persian rugs. Khed sat on a sofa, accompanied by only 2 guests, both men of distinguished and refined appearance. He made a slight gesture with his hand, signaling her to begin. The music started, a soft, hypnotic melody that flowed like the desert wind. Layla took a deep breath and began to move. Her arms glided through the air, the veils floating like waves while the anklet bells marked the rhythm. Each movement was deliberate yet naturally graceful. Khed watched her intently, his face expressionless, but his eyes revealed something deeper: curiosity, admiration, perhaps even something he himself didn't fully understand. Layla danced not merely out of obligation, but as if she were silently telling a story. With every spin, she remembered her journey to that moment, her struggle for survival, gentle sound of Khaled's applause. His guests followed suit, offering discreet praise for her performance. "Impressive," Called said, finally rising to his feet. "You've exceeded my expectations, Layla." Despite the compliment, Leah remained composed. "Thank you, Mr. Kidd," she replied firmly before leaving. Kidd approached her and spoke in a low, almost confidential tone. "You did well tonight. Keep it up, and this arrangement will benefit us both." Layla simply nodded and left the room, relieved to have completed her first night later. As she made her way back to the room assigned to her, Lila crossed paths with a strikingly imposing woman. Her sharp features and piercing eyes seemed to scrutinize every detail. Sophia, Khaled's cousin, made no effort to hide her disapproval as she glared at Lila. "So you're CED's dancer?" Sophia said in a cold, sarcastic tone. "I hope you know your place." Layla remained composed. "My place is wherever my son is safe and well-fed." Sophia raised an eyebrow, surprised by the firm response. "We'll see how long you last." Leah refused to be intimidated. She knew she would face opposition, but nothing would her from her goal. Back in her room, Leah sat in front of the mirror, carefully removing her accessories. Her reflection revealed a tired but determined woman. Yusuf's face came to mind, and she allowed herself a small smile downstairs. Ked was still in the room now. Alone, his gaze lingered on the empty space where Lila had danced just minutes earlier, lost in thought. There was something about her that intrigued him deeply, something he couldn't ignore. The third night came quickly, and Lila was already beginning to grow accustomed to the palace's luxuries. Yet despite the opulent surroundings, she knew that with every step she took, there she was delving deeper into an unknown and dangerous world. This time the hall was even more magnificent. Illuminated by crystal chandeliers, Ked, seated at the center, was alone. The absence of guests intrigued her, but she didn't dare ask. She simply adjusted her veils and waited for the music to begin. The first notes played soft as the desert breeze. Layla began her performance, each movement precise yet fluid. The silence in the room was almost oppressive, broken only by the delicate chime of her ankle bells. Ked watched her intently, his dark eyes following every spin and every graceful motion. When the music ended, Layla offered her customary bow. Ked stared at her for a few moments before rising and approaching her. "You dance as if you carry the weight of 1,000 stories," he said in a low voice. Leah swallowed hard. "My story doesn't matter. I'm here to fulfill the contract." Ked raised an eyebrow as though he hadn't expected such a direct response. He tilted his head slightly as if trying to decipher her. "Sometimes a contract can be more than just words on paper," he murmured before walking away. Lila felt a shiver run down her spine. Those words echoed in her mind as she left the hall, but her thoughts were interrupted when she once again encountered Sophia in the core Safia, with her cold eyes and cynical smile. Block Leah's path. "You think you know, Ked, don't be fooled. A man of many secrets. I'm not interested in his secrets." Leah replied firmly, trying to stay calm. Sophia let out a sharp laugh. "Ignorance is dangerous, especially for someone like you." Before Lila could respond, Sophia walked away, leaving a heavy air of distrust behind. Later that night, Lila heard footsteps in the hallway outside her room. Curious, she opened the door slightly and saw Ked walking toward a secluded wing of the palace. Intrigued, she followed him from a distance, staying hidden in the shadows. He entered a room, but Lila couldn't see inside clearly. However, she could hear fragments of a conversation. Khaled's voice was deep and restrained. "She cannot know not." Yet Leah couldn't catch the rest, but those words planted a seed of doubt in her mind. Who was Ked really? Why had he chosen her for this role in his life? When Ked left the room, Layla quickly returned to her quarters, taking deep breaths to calm herself. She knew something was being kept from her, something that could change everything. The next morning, Ked invited her for an informal meeting in the palace garden. He appeared more relaxed, dressed in light clothing, but his gaze still carried the weight of hidden truths. "Layla," he began, as they walked slowly among the flowers. "Why did you accept my contract?" She hesitated before answering. "My son means everything to me. No matter what I have to do, I will do it to give him a better life." Ked nodded as if he had anticipated her response. "A mother's love is powerful, but I wonder how much are you willing to sacrifice for him?" Leah stopped and looked him straight in the eye. Everything to the very last part of me. They stood in silence for a moment, and Layla noticed a flicker of something in Ked's expression. Perhaps respect, perhaps something more. Then I hope you'll never have to prove it, he said, his tone cryptic, before Layla could ask. What he meant, Ked changed the subject and guided her back to the palace later that night. Leah reflected on everything that had happened. She knew Ked was hiding something, and it unsettled her, but her priority remained Yusuf. If staying firm in this contract meant keeping her son safe, she would endure even if the cost was greater than she anticipated. Outside, Ked stood by a large window, gazing at the full moon, his hands clasped behind his back. He couldn't deny that Lila was different, someone who challenged his carefully maintained facade of control. She was a reminder that the past never truly stayed buried. As the night wore on, the secrets they both carried became more intertwined, like the veils Leah wore in her dances, delicate, yet full of hidden meaning. Layla woke early that morning, but the peace was short-lived as she adjusted the scarf over her hair in front of the mirror. A sharp knock echoed through the door before she could respond. Sophia entered without permission, her gaze cold and unforgiving. I see you've adapted quickly to this place, Sophia said, crossing her arms, but don't be fooled. You're nothing more than a disposable piece in Khalid's game. Lee took a deep breath, refusing to react to the venom in the woman's words. Whatever his reasons are, they're none of your concern. Sophia stepped closer, narrowing her eyes. You think you know who he is, but you're chasing an illusion. Ked will never let someone like you get close to him. Leela held her gaze, feeling a quiet anger rise within her. I don't want to get close to Kid. I'm here for my son's sake. Nothing more. Safia's sarcastic laugh echoed through the room. We'll see how long that lie holds later. Leah tried to focus on her dance lessons. The choreographer, a stern woman, corrected every movement with precision. Yet Safia's constant presence loomed like a shadow, her words echoing in Lila's mind. But Lila knew she couldn't afford to falter. Each perfected move was one step closer to ensuring Yu's safety that evening. Ked hosted an intimate dinner. For a select few guests, Leah was summoned to perform again. The hall was adorned with candles, their warm glow illuminating the faces of those present. Sophia was there, her triumphant expression suggesting she had something planned. Lila began to dance, focusing on every movement. The music filled the hall, creating an almost magical atmosphere. But as she twirled, her eyes met Kitty's. There was something in his gaze that unsettled her, something that seemed to see beyond the dancer before him. When the performance ended, the guests applauded politely, but Sophia rose and walked over to Ked, ignoring Ela entirely. A beautiful display, wasn't it? She remarked, her smile cold. Yes, it was, Kid, replied calmly. Though his eyes remained on Leela, Sophia noticed and pressed her lips together. I hope you know what you're doing, cousin. A woman like her doesn't belong in this world. Ked turned to Sophia, his expression hardening. And what world is that? A world where we judge without understanding. Leia has more dignity than many who walk through these doors? Sophia fell silent, but her anger was ID. She left the hall, leaving behind a heavy tension in the air. In the following days, Layla tried to avoid Safia whenever possible, but the woman always seemed to be lurking nearby. One night, Lila found a letter slipped under her door. The message was short and threatening. Be careful who you trust. Your secret could cost you dearly. Lila felt her stomach turn. She knew Sophia was behind it, but she couldn't understand how the woman had discovered so much about her, determined to protect you. Leela went straight to Ked. He was in his study, surrounded by piles of documents, but he looked up as soon as she entered. I need to speak with you, Lila said firmly. Of course, Ked replied, gesturing for her to sit. Lila hesitated, but decided to get straight to the point. Your cousin Safia is trying to threaten me. I don't know what she wants, but I can't allow this to affect my son. Khalid's brow furrowed, his expression hardening. Sophia has enough authority here. I will handle her. Can you guarantee that Layla challenged, her eyes burning with determination, because I won risk use of safety? Ked held her gaze for a long moment before responding. Leah, you have my word. As long as you are under this roof, nothing will happen to you or your son. Despite his firm tone, Layla knew it wouldn't be that simple. Sophia wouldn't give up easily. Later that night, Sophia met with an unknown man in a secluded corner of the palace. Leah exposed, she said, handing him an envelope. Do whatever it takes to get her out of here. The man nodded and disappeared into the shadows. Sophia smiled, convinced that Lila would soon be removed for good. Lila, however, was not one to back down. Her maternal instincts and unwavering determination prepared her for any battle ahead. Ked, on the other hand, was beginning to see that Lila was no ordinary woman. She had a strength that defied everything around her, and including him at the center of it all. Fate seemed to be weaving their lives together in an inescapable bond. Layla adjusted her veils with trembling fingers. Sophia's veiled threat still echoed in her mind, but she couldn't let fear take hold as she walked down the corridor toward the grand hall. She thought of Yusuf's face. Every step she took in that luxurious place was for him. Her dance wasn't just a performance, it was an act of survival. When Lila entered the hall, the atmosphere was heavy. Ked was once again seated alone on his usual divan. The silence was broken only by the soft chime of the bells on her ankles as she took her position. He made a subtle gesture, and the music began filling the room with a hypnotic melody. Leah's movements were precise, but her heart raced. Her mind struggled to stay in the present, even as the weight of her worries threatened to overwhelm her. For her, the dance was more than just a contract. It was a way to express all the anguish and hope she carried within Ked. On the other hand, watched her with unusual focus. He seemed captivated, as though each of her gestures revealed something he had never noticed before. There was a silent connection between them, something Lila couldn't explain, but couldn't ignore either. After the dance, Ked slowly approached her without saying a word. He stopped just a few steps away. His eyes locked on hers. "You're stronger than you seem," he said, his tone both an observation and a compliment. Lila remained silent. She didn't know how to respond. She was there simply to fulfill her part of the agreement. Yet Ked's intensity unsettled her. "You dance as though you carry the weight of something much greater," he continued. "What gives you that strength?" She hesitated before replying. "My son, he's the reason for everything." Kib nodded slowly as if understanding more than she expected. "Yusuf is lucky to have you as his mother." Leia looked away, feeling a mix of pride and vulnerability, before she could respond. Ked added, "Sophia will no longer be a problem. I promise to protect you and your son, and I will keep my word." There was sincerity in his voice. But Lila knew that words alone wouldn't be enough. Sophia was dangerous, and she needed to stay one step ahead. Later that night, Layla was urgently called to Yusuf's room. The boy had a high fever, and his small body trembled beneath the blankets. Desperate Leah tried to cool his forehead with a damp cloth. Whispering words of comfort, Kid appeared at the door moments later, alarmed by Lila's distress. "What's going on?" he asked, stepping into the room. "He has a fever," Leela said, her voice trembling. "I need to take him to a doctor." Kid gestured quickly, summoning one of his assistants. "Prepare the car immediately. We'll take them to the best hospital in the city." Layla looked at Kid, surprised and grateful. Despite everything, he didn't hesitate to help. Minutes later, they were on their way to the hospital. Lila holding Yusuf's small hand the entire time at the hospital. Yusuf was treated promptly, and the doctor reassured them it was nothing serious. "It's just a high fever. He needs rest and plenty of fluids," the doctor said before discharging them back at the palace. Lila laid YF in bed and sat by his side, watching him sleep. Ked remained at the door, silent, as if respecting the moment. "Thank you," Leah said finally without turning to face him. "We everything. There's no need to thank me." Khalid replied, "I did what anyone would do." Leela let out a quiet sigh. "Not everyone would." Kid took a few steps into the room but stopped before getting too close. "Yusuf is important to you. That makes him important to me as well." Layla finally looked at him, puzzled. There was something in his expression she couldn't quite read. Ked seemed sincere, yet there was also a sadness that didn't match his authoritative demeanor. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked, breaking the silence. Ked hesitated for a moment before answering. "Perhaps because you remind me of something I lost a long time ago." Those words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Layla didn't know how to respond, but felt that Ked was in some way opening up to her, revealing layers he kept hidden from the rest of the world. That night, La barely slept. Ked's words echoed in her mind, mingling with her own doubts and fears. She knew her position in the palace was precarious, but she was also starting to sense that something deeper was unfolding. Meanwhile, downstairs, Ked remained in his study, his eyes fixed on an old photograph he held in his hands. The image showed a smiling woman holding a small child. He ran his thumb over the woman's face. His eyes filled with memories. I promised I'd never let this happen again. He murmured to himself before tucking the photo away and turning off the lights. Fate seemed determined to intertwine Layla's and Ked's lives even further. But what lay ahead would test their strength and convictions. The palace's golden lights reflected off the cold marble walls as Lila walked down the main corridor. Her footsteps echoed, but her mind was preoccupied with thoughts of you and Ked. Her constant concern for her son's safety now shared space with Ked. Lead's enigmatic words, "You remind me of something I lost." Her thoughts were interrupted when, turning a corner, she came face to face with Sophia. Ked's cousin was dressed elegantly, but her eyes were like blades, sharp and full of disdain. "You've done well to capture Ked's attention," Sophia said with a venomous smile. "But don't be fooled, Lila. He may seem kind, but he's ruthless when it comes to protecting his reputation." "I'm not interested in anyone's approval here," Leah replied, standing firm. "I'm here only for my son." Sophia took a step forward, her voice low, but laden with menace. "Be careful what you say. You're playing with forces you don't understand." Lila held Sophia's gaze, but before she could respond, Ked appeared in the corridor. His quick stride suggested he had overheard part of the exchange. "Sophia," he called, his voice low, yet commanding. "May I have a word with you in private?" Lila remained where she was while watching as Sophia walked away with Ked. The tension in the air was palpable. Something significant was about to unfold, and Lila knew it would be wise to stay vigilant. Ked led Sophia into one of the palace offices and shut the door behind them. His usually composed face now bore an uncharacteristic hardness. "I want you to stop your scheming, Sophia," he said, crossing his arms. "I'm only protecting our family." Sophia replied, her chin raised defiantly. "Lila is a threat to everything we built." Cold narrowed his eyes. "Layla is not a threat. She's a woman trying to protect her son, something you clearly don't understand." "She's an outsider," Sophia shot back, her voice brimming with anger. "Do you trust her more than your own family?" "I trust her because she's proven her loyalty," Ked said firmly. "And you've only given me reasons to question yours." Sophia's face paled momentarily, but she quickly regained her composure. "If you keep offending her, you'll bring disgrace to our family enough." Ked cut her off, his voice sharp as a blade. "If you try to harm Lila or Yusuf again, I'll have no choice but to remove you from this palace for good." A heavy silence fell between them before Sophia abruptly left the room, leaving Ked alone with his thoughts. Meanwhile, Lila sat in her room with Yusuf, who was playing with small wooden blocks Ked had sent for him. She watched her son but couldn't stop thinking about Ked. He was a man of many facets, sometimes protective, sometimes distant, yet always shrouded in mystery. When there was a knock at the door, she braced herself for more trouble. But it was Ked. "May I speak with you?" he asked, remaining at the doorway. Layla nodded, signaling that he could enter. Ked stepped in, but kept a respectful distance. "I want you to know that you're safe here," he said, sincerity in his eyes. "I won't allow Sophia or anyone else to threaten you or YF." "I appreciate that," Leah replied, folding her arms, "but I can't help wondering why you're so willing to protect us." Ked sighed, looking away for a moment before meeting her gaze again. "Because you remind me of something I lost," he said, his voice now tinged with emotion. "My wife passed away years ago, and with her, I lost the chance to have a family. But seeing you fight for your son, it reminds me of what truly matters." Layla remained silent, words hitting her in an unexpected way. There was something genuine in his confession, something that made her want to believe him. "Thank you," she said softly at last. Khaled gave a faint smile. "Get some rest, Layla. Tomorrow will be an important day." The next morning, Sophia, still furious after Siadrudi's reprimand, schemed in secret in her room. She reviewed plans with the same mysterious man she had met earlier. "Everything must be perfect," she said, handing him a folder of documents. "I want Layla exposed once and for all." Outside, one of the palace guards overheard part of their conversation and quickly reported it to Ked upon hearing the news. Ked immediately understood that Sophia was willing to cross any line to achieve her goals. He knew he had to act before anything more serious happened by nightfall. Ked summoned Lila to the main hall. She felt tense but accepted the invitation. As soon as she entered, Ked approached her with determination in his eyes. "Layla, I want you to know that you are not alone in this fight," he said firmly. "I will make sure nothing happens to you or Yuf." Layla looked at him, feeling the weight of his words. "I hope you're right, CED, because I've already lost everything. Once I can't lose my son," Cold nodded, "and I won't let that happen." That night marked the beginning of a new battle where loyalties would be tested and secrets would finally come to light. The palace was closed, poked in an unsettling calm, after ordering that Sophia be placed under surveillance. CED went to the reading room, a place where memories often haunted him. Layla, meanwhile, sat in her room, burdened by a tension she couldn't quite explain. Something inside her told her she was on the verge of uncovering truths that could change everything. Later that evening, Ked sent a note asking Lila to meet him in the main hall when she arrived. He stood by a large fireplace, his eyes fixed on the flames. "Lee, thank you for coming," he said without looking away from the fire. "Why did you call me?" she asked. Crossing her arms, Ked turned slowly, his expression serious. "There are things you need to know. My past, my losses, they weigh more heavily on us than you realize." Leah frowned, confused. "If it's something that could affect us, I believe I have the right to know." He nodded and gestured for her to sit. "Years ago, I lost my wife in an accident. It was a moment that shattered everything I thought was secure. Since then, I've shut myself off from the world, refusing to let anyone get close. But then you came along." Leah felt a chill but stayed silent, listening intently. "You are not just a dancer in my palace. Layla, you've brought something I thought I had lost forever." Hope Ked continued, his voice softer. "The way you fight for Yusuf, it reminds me of what truly matters in life. I see my own struggles in yours, but I also see a strength I have long since lost." "Why are you telling me all this now?" Leah asked, trying to process the weight of his words. Ked stepped closer, his eyes locked on hers. "Because to protect you and your son, I need you to trust me completely. And for that, you need to know the whole truth." Leah stayed silent as Khalid went on. He revealed that his wife's death had not been just an accident, but the result of intrigue within his own family. This explained why he kept Sophia under surveillance and why he was so determined to protect Leah. "My family never accepted my wife. She didn't come from a noble social circle, and to them that was unacceptable." Ked said, his voice heavy with bitterness. "We paid the price for defying them, and she lost her life." Layla felt a lump in her throat. She had never imagined that Ked carried such deep pain. "And now you think Sophia will do the same to me?" "It's not a matter of thinking." "Elila, I know," Kay replied. "She has already shown she's willing to go to any lengths to get rid of you. That's why you must always be on guard. Trust no one but me." Ked's words hung in the air, filled with intensity. Lila felt torn. On one hand, she wanted to believe he was being sincere. On the other, trusting him meant placing her fate in the hands of a man who still harbored many secrets. The next morning, Lila decided to seek answers on her own after ensuring YF was safe. She walked through the palace to the secluded wing, where Ked kept personal documents and belongings. She needed to learn more about the man who had promised to protect her family. Entering the room, Layla found a photo album on the table. It contained images of Ked alongside a smiling woman and a young boy. The happiness on their faces contrasted sharply with the serious expression Ked wore now. As she flipped through the album, a letter fell out. Layla picked it up and read the handwritten words. It was a farewell message from Khalid's wife, written shortly before her death. "My dearest Ked, I know our love will face storms, but never forget what we built together. Protect our family even if it costs everything, with eternal love." Almost tears filled Leah's eyes as she read it last. She understood the burden Kid carried. He wasn't just protecting her. He was trying to atone for a failure he hadn't been able to prevent in the past. Later, Kid found Leah sitting quiet in the garden. He approached her slowly, aware that something had changed. "You read the letter," Kid said bluntly. Lila simply nodded. "Now I understand why you do what you do, but even so, it doesn't change the fact that we're caught in a dangerous game." Ked sighed, sitting down beside her. "I don't want you to go through what Amal went through. I don't want to lose anyone else. Then what do we do now? Layla asked, her eyes filled with determination. Look toward the horizon where the sun was beginning to set. We fight and we won't let anyone take away what's ours that night. Laya felt more confident. For the first time she saw Ked not as a distant and enigmatic man, but as someone who carried the same pain and strength as she did. Despite the dangers, she felt that together they could overcome any obstacle. While Leah put Yu to bed, Ked, in another part of the palace, began devising a plan. He knew Sophia still had tricks up her sleeve, but he was ready to do whatever it took to protect Layla and Yusuf. The pieces were in motion, and fate would soon test them all. Lila woke with a sense of unease. The palace, usually serene in the morning, seemed cloaked in a heavy tension as she dressed. She heard hurried footsteps in the hallway, opening the door. She found a maid with a pale face who warned her, "Miss Sophia is planning something." Be careful, a tension in the air was palpable. But Lila forced herself to stay calm. She knew Safia wouldn't give up easily, and the only thing she could do. Lila returned to Yusuf's room and found him drawing on a sheet of paper. He smiled as she entered. "Look, Mama, it's you and me in the garden." Layla knelt down to see the drawing, her heart swelling with love. "It's beautiful, my dear." She hugged him tightly, silently promising herself that she would do whatever it took to keep him safe that night. Kid convened a meeting with his most trusted allies in the palace's private hall. He explained the situation in detail, emphasizing the urgency of exposing Safia and ensuring Lila and Yusuf's safety. "She's already caused too much damage," Cold said firmly. "We need to uncover her lies before she gains more allies." One of the men suggested intercepting Sophia's messages. To learn more about her plans, Ked agreed and tasked Faird with leading the operation. Meanwhile, in a secluded part of the city, Sophia met with a man of ominous appearance. "We have little time," she said, handing him an envelope. "Make sure these documents get into the right hands." The man nodded and disappeared into the night. Sophia smiled, confident that her victory was near in the days that followed. The attention in the palace grew. Ked and Faird worked tirelessly to gather evidence against Sophia, while Leia did her best to keep Yusuf distracted and away from the turmoil. Finally, one afternoon, F5 brought good news. "We intercepted a crucial message," he told Ked. "We now have enough evidence to expose Sfia Kid." Immediately called for a family council meeting. Leela was invited to attend, knowing that her life and Yusuf's were at stake in the main hall. The council members were gathered, their expressions solemn. Kid presented the evidence Faird had collected, including messages that revealed Sophia's malicious intentions. "Sophia has endangered not only Lila and YF, but also the reputation of this palace." Ked declared her actions are unforgivable. The council reviewed the evidence, and it didn't take long for them to reach a decision. Sophia was to be officially banished from the palace and handed over to the authorities to answer for her crime. Leah felt immense relief as she heard the verdict. At last, the threat was being eliminated. Safia was escorted out of the palace under the watchful eyes of the guards. Her expression was a mix of fury and humiliation, but she offered no resistance as the doors closed behind her. Layla felt as though a tremendous weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Ked approached her, his eyes reflecting both relief and determination. "Now you and Yusuf can finally have peace," he said with a gentle smile. Leah nodded. Moved. "Thank you, Ked, for everything. I only did what was right," he replied. "And I'll do whatever it takes to ensure you both remain safe from now on." That night, Leah sat on the balcony of her room, gazing at the stars for the first time in a long while. She felt a genuine sense of calm. Yusuf slept peacefully, and Kid had kept his promise to protect them. Yet Layla knew that the future might still hold challenge. Alice, the following days, brought a tranquility. Layla hadn't felt in ages. Sophia had been banished from the palace, and Kid had fulfilled his promise of ensuring her and Yusuf's safety still. Lila couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was on the horizon. One morning, while having coffee on the terrace, Kid approached. Looking more relaxed than usual, he held a small envelope in his hands, his eyes carrying a peculiar glimmer. "Layla," he began, handing her the envelope. "I want you to read this." Leah opened the envelope and found a handwritten letter. The words, though simple, carried an emotional weight. It was a formal message from Ked, offering her the freedom to leave the palace with you, if she wished. "Why are you giving me this?" she asked, confused. I want you to know that you've never been a prisoner here. Ked explained, you are free to choose what's best for you and your son. But I also want you to know that if you decide to stay, this palace will always be your home. Layla looked at Ked, feeling a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. What if I don't know what the best choice is? Kid stepped closer, his eyes meeting hers. Then I asked you to trust me, not just as someone who promised to protect you, but as someone who deeply cares about you. As Lelo pondered Ked's words, Yusuf played in the garden, laughing and running with a small wooden airplane. Kid had commissioned for him. The scene was simple but filled with meaning. Layla knew Yusuf was safe here, something she had never been able to ensure elsewhere. Yet the thought of depending on Ked still unsettled her. She had always fought alone, and allowing someone to become such an integral part of her life was new and daunting. That evening, Ked arranged a special dinner on the terrace. The table was adorned with flowers and candles, and a gentle breeze made the atmosphere even more inviting. Leah hesitated to accept the invitation, but eventually decided to go. Why all this, she asked as she sat down. I want to celebrate the fact that we're finally free from threats, Kid replied with a. Layla remained silent, deeply moved by the gesture. She knew Kay was showing her that she could play an important role here. Not just as a guest, but as someone who could contribute meaningfully to this place. It's beautiful, she finally said. I'd love to do something like this. As Leah began planning what she would do with the hall, Ked watched her from a distance, a growing sense of satisfaction filling him. He had always known Lila was strong and determined, but seeing her thrive under his protection warmed his heart. Yet Ked also knew that Chesed still lay ahead. His position in the palace and his connection to Lila could spark new conflicts, and he would need to be ready to face them one afternoon, as Lila worked in the hall. You came running in holding a piece of paper. Mama, look what? I drew. Lila took the paper and saw a simple but meaningful drawing. It was of her, Yusuf, and Ked, all holding hands with a bright sun shining above them. It's beautiful, my love, she said, hugging her son. Ked, who had just entered the room, smiled as he saw the drawing. Looks like we're already a family, he remarked playfully. Lila looked at him, and for the first time she felt that it could truly be possible. The following week, Layla woke with a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. The security Ked provided, and Yu's laughter filled her heart with hope that morning. As she strolled through the garden, Ked approached her with a look that blended seriousness and warmth. Layla, may I steal you away for a few hours today? He asked, extending his hand. Where are we going? She asked. Surprised it's a secret? He replied with an enigmatic smile. Khalid took her to the desert, where a hidden oasis seemed to appear out of nowhere. The place was magical, with palm trees swaying gently in the breeze and a lake reflecting the sky. At the center was a table elegantly decorated with white flowers and candles. Ked. What is this? Leah asked. I'm amazed. I want this moment to be unforgettable. He replied, pulling out a chair for her to sit during dinner. Ked spoke about how Leah and Yusuf had transformed his life before you. This palace was just an empty structure, he said, but now it's a home, and I want to make it official. Layla looked at him puzzled until Ked stood and took a small box from his pocket. He knelt down, his eyes fixed on hers. Layla, from the moment you entered my life, everything changed. You've brought light to my darkest days and shown me the true meaning of love and courage. I want to spend the rest of my life by your side. Will you marry me? Leah was speechless, tears streaming down her face, with a voice choked with emotion. She replied, yes, Ked, I will. Ked smiled as he slipped the ring onto her finger, a delicate gold band with a small diamond that sparkled in the sunlight. He stood and pulled her into a tight embrace, followed by a gentle, emotion-filled kiss. The following months were dedicated to wedding preparations. Yusuf, excited, took part in every detail. The palace was transformed into a fairy tale setting, with gardens adorned with flower arches and lights that twinkled like stars on the big day. Layla wore a white gown with intricate gold accents. Her light veil floated in the breeze as she walked down the aisle, accompanied by Yusu, who proudly held her hands. Kid waited for her at the altar, dressed in a pristine ceremonial tunic. His smile was calm, but his eyes conveyed the deep emotion of the moment when their eyes met. Leah felt as though the weight of her past had vanished, the efficient, recited words of unity, and Ked slipped a new ring onto Lila's finger. When she did the same for him, A profound sense of wholeness filled them both after the ceremony. The reception was held in the palace gardens. Guests danced, laughed, and celebrated the couple's union. Leah and Ked danced beneath the stars while Yusuf ran between the tables. Handing out small bouquets of flowers, Ked Leah whispered as they danced, "Thank you for everything, for giving me a home and a new life." "It's I who should thank you," Ked replied, his voice filled with emotion. "You've brought joy and meaning into my life. Months turned into years, and life at the palace flourished." Leah transformed one wing of the palace into a school for local children, while Key dedicated himself to expanding his humanitarian projects. Yusuf grew up happy, surrounded by love and security. He loved helping Lila at the school and often accompanied Ked on some of his trips. Learning about responsibility and leadership every day, Leah felt that her decision to trust Ked and accept his love had been the right one. The past, though marked by hardships, had laid the foundation for a future filled with love, hope, and happiness. What did you think of Lila and Coley's story? Share your thoughts in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to follow all our stories. And don't miss more heartwarming tales by clicking here on the end screen.